All right, welcome everybody to today's how-to workshop where we're talking about some of my favorite articulate storyline tips, tricks, and time savers. I got to tell you, I've been using Storyline since it first came out, gosh, back in 2012, which would have been 10 years ago now, over 10 years ago now, and I've been teaching it ever since then. And over the years, I have gathered all sorts of tips and tricks that I had to learn the hard way because there was nobody with tips and tricks back when I first started. And so today I'm going to share with you 25 of my absolute favorite tips, tricks, and time savers. Now, if you happen to be watching the recording of this on YouTube, please make sure to click that like, subscribe, and bell button so you can get alerted the next time I publish a video like this one. All right. Okie dokie. So let's jump into my 25 top articulate storyline tips, tricks, and time savers. We're going to start with some simple ones. And I will tell you all, there's probably going to be some tips that I'm going to share where you're going to think, oh my God, Tim, everybody knows how to do this, right? Well, no, actually, there's a lot of people who don't know how to do it. So if you already know the tip that I'm sharing, by all means, smile and nod and pretend like you're blown away so everyone else can feel good about being blown away as well. All right, so my first set of tips are going to be some basic, simple user interface tips when you're using Storyline that can help speed up your workflows, all that good stuff. The first thing I want to talk about is customizing the quick access toolbar. This is a feature that exists in all Microsoft products, including Storyline, and it's a feature that I think is, quite frankly, underutilized. So up here at the top, you'll see, you've all seen this before probably. There's the save button, there's the undo, redo button, but you can customize this however you want to add additional features there. And I usually do it when I want to add some commonly used features. So if you click on this little arrow here, you'll notice that you can toggle on and off these different options, and you can also rearrange the position of the quick access. You can see here, I can put show below ribbon, and it'll put the quick access toolbar down here. And I can add as many things as I want to this toolbar. And you can add just about anything you use in Storyline to the toolbar. So for example, if I use a lot of entrance animations, like I have this text here, I can go to my animations tab, and you can right click on any feature, and you can add to the quick access toolbar. And you'll very quickly now be able to add animations from there. Another example, I caught oftentimes insert shapes, so I can add that to the quick access toolbar. Or maybe you frequently add text, right? Right click, add to quick access toolbar. And you can create your own custom set of tools that you can regularly access. And of course, you can always right click or click on the arrow here and move the quick access toolbar back to the top where it was, right? I think it's easier to have it below the ribbon right here where you can access all sorts of things. Same thing with any of the preview options. You can right click, add the quick access toolbar, create your own little custom toolbar. That makes it a little bit easier than having to navigate the ribbon. You can have your favorite access tools, your favorite tools easily to access here. So that's my first tip, customizing quick access toolbar. Simple one, but once you take the time to do it, I promise it will save you a lot of time. All right. Our second tip, navigating Storyline with keyboard shortcuts. This is another one that can be a time-saving tip. If I am personally, I'll be honest with you, I'm not really big on keyboard shortcuts, but some people love keyboard shortcuts. One of the features that are hidden in plain sight is that you can actually navigate all of your different ribbon items using keyboard shortcuts. So for example, if you happen to be on a PC, if you hit the Alt key on your keyboard, you'll get all these numbers here. Now, if you happen to be on a Mac, it's a little bit different. You hit the Option key, and you'll see that there's all these letters and numbers here that show up on the screen. So I press the Option key, and now if, let's say I wanted to go to the Animations tab, I'll hit A, and it takes me to the Animations tab. And I can hit Option again and bring up all those numbers, and maybe I want to go back to Home, I'll hit H, and you can navigate through it. And you can see that you can do just about anything with keyboard shortcuts, right? So again, if you're on a Mac, that's the Options key. And if you're on a PC, it's going to be the Alt key to turn those items on, all right? Real quickly, again, if you just happen to be joining us, make sure that you post any questions that you have in the questions tab, and I'll answer those at the end, just so I don't miss any of them, all right? So that was tip number 2, navigating Storyline with keyboard shortcuts. Let's do a Mac-specific tip. This one, I won't lie to you, took me, gosh, probably a year or two to discover by accident. I don't know. Let me ask this real quickly. How many of you And you can put this in chat. How many of you use Storyline on a Mac? It's Cassie, Melissa, Danny. Oh gosh, we have quite a few people. Okay. How many of you have ran it, and maybe you already know the answer to this. How many of you, and by the way, if you're not sure how people use Storyline on a Mac, the way we use Storyline on a Mac is through Parallels. So I'm on a Mac, but I'm running Windows through Parallels, right? Storyline has a lot of information on that that you can check out. And of course, you can run it through Boot Camp if you have a Mac. That's a separate conversation for a separate day, but that's how we're running Storyline on a Mac. Unfortunately, Storyline does not have a native Mac version. I was going to say yet, but I don't think they ever will, which is kind of a bummer. Okay, I don't know if anyone's run into this issue. Have you ever had issues deleting stuff from your slide on a Mac, right? Let's say I want to delete this icon here. If I hit the delete key, nothing happens, right? I can't tell you how many times I've seen people, because they couldn't delete things, what they would do is they would right-click on it and at least cut it to get rid of it. Now it's on your clipboard, right? It kind of acts as a delete, but now you have all these items on your clipboard, right? So if I undo that, the way you delete items for whatever reason on a Mac is you have to hold the function key and then press delete. So the function key is down here in the bottom left corner. I hold function, hit delete. Oh, let me do that one more time. Function delete, and it'll delete it, but I must have broke that. There we go. So function and delete is how you do that. It was like a year and a half of me right-clicking and hitting cut before I actually discovered that. Blair says the command key also works. Very good. It's a lifesaver. Yeah, I found that by accident. I was probably like just hitting my keyboard going, please delete this. And it deleted it. All right, that was tip number 3, deleting objects on a Mac. If you ever use a Mac and you didn't know that, trust me, it's very frustrating. All right, so tip number 4, undocking and redocking panels. This is a simple one, but it's one that people don't realize the benefit of all the time. And it's also something that can mess people up, especially when you're brand new to Storyline. One of the things that you can do in Storyline with all the different panels, whether it's your scenes panel or your triggers panel or your slide layers panel or even your timeline, is that you can actually undock these items from the interface. And so if you look at your timeline here, let's say you're working on a really intricate slide and you want to undock it, especially if you're working on multiple monitors, there's this button here. This is the undock button. And if you undock it, it allows you to move this panel wherever you want. Now, where this is most beneficial is if you have more than one monitor, right? I don't know if anyone remembers this. You remember the first day, the first time you ever worked with dual monitors, like ages ago, and it was like this glorious moment where you realized how powerful you are now that you have more than one monitor. Like, that's what it does for you. You can move this to a second monitor and have a big timeline over here while you work on your slide over there. And you can do that with the timeline. You can do that with the triggers panel. You can do that with the slide layers panel. You can do that with the scenes panel. You can undock everything. Now, one of the things I see frequently from people who are new to Storyline is they accidentally undock everything, and you have this mess, right? You have all this stuff everywhere, and they go, I can't find my triggers panel anymore. Well, one thing that you can do to easily clean everything up is if you go to the View tab, and let me move everything out of the way, there's this option here to redock all windows. So if you accidentally undock stuff and you lose it, you can't figure out what happened to your triggers panel or what happened to your timeline, click redock windows, and it'll put everything back into its place. So that's a really nice feature if you're working on dual monitors. And if you're not working on dual monitors, it is time to upgrade yourself to the life of 2022. Get a dual monitor, and it'll make your life much easier. Trust me. Okay, so that was tip number 4, undocking, redocking panels. Okay. This is another one. This is fit slide to current window. This is another really simple tip, but it's one that if you're especially new to Storyline, you might miss. And I use this feature probably more often than any other thing I'm doing in Storyline. One of the things that's a big pet peeve of mine is when you're opening up a Storyline project and the slide is like awkwardly zoomed in here, right? Like you can't really see the top or the bottom. You can't see the edges, and you have to do all this scrolling. It's just not good when you're designing slides. So one of the things you can do is you'll notice in the very, very bottom left corner, there's this little square. And when you hover over it, I know it's really tiny, it says fit slide to current window. And if you click on that, it will automatically resize the slide so that you can see all of the edges. And it's really, really nice. And as you resize things like the timeline, it'll automatically resize the slide, so it's always visible. All the edges are visible, which is really helpful. So again, if you zoom really, really far in, or let's say you're zoomed really, 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 really far out, you could just click on this button here in the bottom left corner, and it'll resize it for you, right? Tip number 5, fit slide to current window. Okay. Tip number 6, adjust the auto recovery settings. This is a feature that hopefully you never have to think about or you never have to experience, but I'm sure you have. One of the really nice things that's built into Storyline is auto recovery. And what auto recovery is in the background, Storyline is automatically saving your project for you. It's kind of like an autosave, but it operates a little bit differently. It's not saving in real time. It's by default, it's saving every 10 minutes. And if you've ever had Storyline crash on you, and I can't imagine anybody has never had Storyline crash on them, it happens sometimes, frequently. You'll sometimes get a dialog box that says, do you want to recover this project? Well, you can actually adjust how frequently Storyline is saving your project in the background. So if you were to go to the File tab and go to Storyline Options here, there is an option under the General tab, Save Auto Recovery Information every 10 minutes. That's the default, but you can adjust it. You can make it as frequent as you want or as infrequent as you want. But note that there's a cost to that. So let's say you might think, well, great, let's just set this to 1 minute, right? Well, yeah, you can do that if you have a really, really powerful computer. But note that every 1 minute, it's going to be saving in the background, and that's going to take up some of your memory and some of your CPU usage, and it could significantly slow down your computer, right? So maybe there's a happy medium. Maybe you set it to every 5 minutes, or leave it at every 10 minutes. But either way, you have the option to change how frequently it is saving that information, so that when Storyline does crash, and it will crash on you, you can recover all of that. All right, so that's tip number, what number? 6, adjusting the auto recovery settings. All right, let's move on to some other tips when it comes to working with content. So these are going to be tips focused on object styles and formatting. The first one I'm going to talk about is inserting placeholder text. And this is one of my favorite tips. This tip not only works in Storyline, it works in, I think, just about any Windows program, or at least any Microsoft program, whether it's Word or PowerPoint or some other Microsoft product, but it works really well here in Storyline. Let's say you're designing a prototype, a visual prototype, right? And you need to insert some placeholder text, which is known in the design world as Lorem Ipsum. It looks like Italian. It's not Italian, it's gibberish, but it's really great for when you're designing something and you need some placeholder text. I don't know if anyone else does this. I used to do this where I just go blah, 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 right? That's not what you want, right? Well, one of the things you can do is you can insert a little code into your text box and tell it how much text you actually want. So I'm going to delete this word text here, and I'm going to type in a little code. It's going to be the equal sign with the word Lorem, and then a parenthesis sign, and then another parenthesis sign. Now, in between these two parentheses, whatever number I put in there, it will generate that many paragraphs of placeholder text. So let's say I want 2 paragraphs. I'll do 2, hit enter, and now I have 2 paragraphs of Lorem Ipsum text. It just generates it. Now, there are a few other codes where you can change it to indicate how many sentences you want. I think you can do number of words. For me, I usually just do paragraphs, right? So I'll show that one more time in case you wanted to see that. So to enter that code, it's the equal sign, the word Lorem, parenthesis sign, the number you want. Let's do 4 paragraphs this time, and then a closed parenthesis sign. Hit enter, and now I have 4 paragraphs of Lorem Ipsum text. And I can make this much smaller, and now we have some placeholder text, right? Again, that works in any Microsoft product, Microsoft Word, PowerPoint. It's a great little tool. I used to go to this website where you could copy and paste Lorem Ipsum text whenever I needed it, and now you can just generate it. And of course, you can delete whatever you need if you don't need that. All right. Okay, that was tip number 7. Insert Lorem Ipsum text. Tip number 8. Copy and pasting formatting using the format painter. All right. So this is another tip. This is a feature that comes from a lot of the Microsoft products, Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, and it's one that I use all the time in Storyline as well, which is the Format Painter. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Format Painter, or maybe you're vaguely aware of the Format Painter, essentially what it allows you to do is it allows you to copy the formatting of something from one object or text or something to another object. So for example, I have these two text boxes here, and let's say I wanted to copy this formatting from this text box to this, so it'll be exactly the same, and it will copy everything from the size, the color, everything. So what I'll do is I'm just going to highlight this text, and then you'll see the Format Painter up here under the Home tab. I'll click on that, and I don't know if you can see it, but my cursor, it's very tiny here. I can't make that bigger, unfortunately. Has a little paintbrush on it. And now I can go paint, if you will, highlight any text, and it automatically reformats it to match whatever I copied. And it automatically turns the Format Painter off. So I'll do that one more time just for demonstration. I'll highlight whatever I want to copy, in this case text, turn on the Format Painter, and draw it over there, and it copies and pastes the formatting. So that's a nice little time-saving trick. The cool thing about the Format Painter, though, is that it's not limited to just text. You can use the Format Painter on all sorts of items, whether it's images or objects. So for example, if you look at this picture here, I have this character here, you'll notice that, oh gosh, no, she's not supposed to have a drop shadow yet. I'm supposed to add that with the Format Painter. Let me remove that so that you can see it. Let me get rid of her shadow. He has a shadow now, she doesn't. So I can turn on the Format Painter. I have him selected, select the Format Painter. I have the little paintbrush on my cursor. Now if I click on her, now she has a shadow. So you can use this for all sorts of different effects and properties. If you spend a lot of time creating, one character or one image, you give it a border, whatever, you can copy the formatting to other items. It also works with shapes. So for example, let's say I want this blue box to have the same style as this. I can select this item, do my Format Painter, click on that, and now it's exactly the same, right? So it works on images, shapes, text, all sorts of stuff. I'll also show you how you can use the Format Painter on multiple objects. This is another cool thing about the Format Painter. So you see I have this icon here with this really cool, I don't know, a reflection. Let's say I wanted to copy and paste it to all of these simultaneously, or more than one item. One thing you can do is if I select this item and I double click on the Format Painter, we are not going to restart my computer today. Double click on the Format Painter. When you double click on it, what it does is it keeps the Format Painter on. So I'll click on this item, and then I'll click on this item, and then I'll click on that item. And I can keep clicking on different items, and it'll keep applying that formatting. And once I'm done, I can just click on the Format Painter, and it turns it off. So that's using the Format Painter across images, shapes, text, icons, multiple objects, all that cool stuff. Now, there's another cool thing that you can do with the Format Painter is you can actually use the Format Painter in Storyline to copy and paste states from one object to another. So you'll notice I have this button here. And if we go to my states panel, you'll see that I've spent a lot of time creating a normal state and a hover state and a down state and a visited state and a disabled state. I created all these states. And if we go look at my other objects here, they have these default states. Well, rather than recreating all these states manually, I can use my Format Painter to copy and paste them over. So just as I did before, I have this object selected. That's the one I want to copy the formatting from. So I'll double click on the Format Painter, and then I'll just click on this button, and now it's copied and pasted all those states. And I'll click on that one, and it's copied and pasted all those states as well. So that's a nice time-saving tip. If you spend some time creating one button, of course you could duplicate the button, but if you want to, you can also copy and paste the formatting, including the states across multiple buttons, which is pretty cool. One thing I also want to highlight, or I should mention this too, you'll notice if I go to my fitness button, you'll notice on my visited state, there's this little icon, because if the learner visited it, maybe I want it to have a little check mark. For reasons that make no sense to me whatsoever, when you copy and paste states to other objects, it does not include the little check mark. I don't know why, but this is another tip that I want to show, that you can add little icons to your buttons and use these for different states. This is kind of a feature that's hidden in plain sight. So if I wanted to add this same icon for the visited state on this button to these other ones, If I go edit my states and go to my visited state here, under the button format tab, you've probably seen these icons over here, but you never thought what they were, right? These are icons that you can add to your buttons. So it's really great when you want to add, like, let's say a check mark to your buttons so that, you know, when somebody visits it, they get a little check mark, or you can do a little lock icon if the button is disabled. So let's say I wanted to add this little check mark. It adds it to the button. You can change the color. You can change how it aligns with the text, and a few other things. It's a really nice little feature. Now, while I'm here editing my state, so that was tip number 10, adding icons to buttons. Again, it's really great for visited states. It's really, really great for disabled states if you say you want to add a lock to it. Now, my next tip, tip number 11, is a time-saving tip to help you toggle between multiple objects while you're editing states. This is another feature that you've probably all seen before, but you've never taken the time to figure out what it actually does. So right now, I'm editing the states of this button. If I wanted to go edit the states of your diet button, right? I'd have to remember to hit Done Editing States, and then click on this button, and then Edit States, and then edit my state. There's actually an easier way that you can toggle between objects while you're editing states. So I'll go back to editing the states of your health. And let's say I wanted to edit the states of your diet button. You'll see over here, I can just click on this drop down, and I can quickly jump to another object on my slide. And if you'll see, it highlights as I go down it. So there's the your diet button. And now I'm editing the states on that object. I didn't have to click Done Editing States, select the object, edit states, and back and forth, right? So now I can go add the little icon over here as well. And now I'm done editing states. Easy peasy. All right, that was tip number 11, toggling between objects when editing states. Ooh, this is my favorite one. This is a good one. It's not my favorite, but it's a really good one. This one's going to be setting default object for shapes, buttons, and markers. This is another feature hidden in plain sight. So if I were to go to my Insert tab and insert a button, let's say this button here, right? That's the default look of a button, right? It has that default blue color, and if I type in words, whatever, that's what it looks like. What if I could just change the default style of buttons so that when I insert a button, they always look like this? You can do that. You can set the default style for buttons, shapes, text, markers, all sorts of interesting things. It's really simple. All you have to do is, let's say you've spent a lot of time stylizing this button, right-click on it, and you'll see there's an option here, Set as Default Button. Now, if I click that option, Set as Default Button, if I go insert a button, let's say another button here, that's the default style now. And I can type my text. Now, for whatever reason, it doesn't make the default text. You still might have to use the format painter, which I can do really quickly to get the text to be the same. But you at least get the style of the shape and the button. You can use that feature, set the default shape, set the default button for all sorts of different objects in Storyline. And I should mention, before somebody asks, and I can, will that move across projects? I knew somebody was going to ask that. Of course, it was you, Tina. Hi, Tina, by the way. So no, it does not move across projects. It is just for this project. So it'll only be in this project. And it won't be for any other ones. And if you change your mind, you can always right-click on another button and set as default button, and it'll change it back, right? But it's just for that one project. Now, let me show you a couple of other ways that I use the same thing with markers, right? Let's say you spend a lot of time creating a style of a marker, right? If I go insert a marker right now, this is the boring, ugly default style, right? If I want it to be like this, right-click, Set as Default Marker, right? And now if I go insert a marker, you see how it's changed the whole look and feel of them? They're no longer blue. They look like the one that I just stylized. So it works for markers. It also works for, let's see what's on here. Oh no, that was it. Oh no, let me go back over here. What did I do on 1.4? Oh yeah, default shapes, right? So you can do the same thing with shapes. Let's say you stylize a shape, right-click, Set as Default Shape. That'll set the style for it. And now if I go insert a shape, let's say this. Oh, not that shape. That was a caption. Let's try it again. That's the caption, right? If I were to change the style of this shape, let's say give it a shape fill of orange And let's do a shadow. I think it'll adopt the shadow in the default. Let's find out. Right click, set as default shape. It's important to remember that it treats captions and shapes separately. So now if I insert a shape, there we go. Now I have my orange shape with the drop shadow. Again, it's just project specific. It does not go across all of your projects in Storyline. All right, that was tip number 12, set default object for shapes, buttons, and markers. All right, let's do number 13, resize multiple objects. This is another cool little feature hidden in plain sight. I'm going to go to this slide here. Let's say you have 3 objects, 3 shapes, 3 images, in this case, 3 icons. You'll see they're all different sizes, right? And let's say we want them to all be the exact same size. There's a couple different ways you can go about doing this. You could do it manually. If you're like me, I used to put it like right on top of the other one. And then I go, okay, well, that's behind it. So let me right click, send it to the back, and then manually resize this shape until it's the same size. Trying to eyeball it, you can do that. Or you can go to the Format tab and play with these numbers here. You know, that's all the manual ways, but there's an automatic way that you can resize multiple shapes to be the same size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the Shift key on my keyboard, select all 3 of these objects. I'll go to the Home tab, and under the Arrange dropdown, there's an option down here at the size, for size. And you'll see there's several options here. They're really tiny, I know, but I promise you they're there. You can make the same width. You can set them to be the same height. You can make them the same size. You can grow to the largest, shrink to the smallest, and you have a couple more size options. So let's say I wanted them to be all the same size. So I'm just going to say make same size. Now it resizes them to be the same size. Why it shows the smallest one, I'm not sure. Maybe it was the first one I selected. I'll go Arrange, Size. Let's make them grow to the largest. There we go. Now they're all exactly the same size. So all I have to do is select multiple objects, go to the Arrange dropdown, Size, and you can resize shapes to be the same size. All right, that was tip number 13, resizing multiple objects. Tip number 14, replace a picture. Let me go to slide 1.8. Yeah, okay, here we are. So let's say you've spent a lot of time designing your slide. You have, say, this donut icon here, right? And you've done a lot of things with the donut icon. Let's say you've added some animation, so there's a motion path on it, and motion paths are based on triggers. I've also added a drop shadow. There might be certain timing in the timeline for it, right? But let's say I needed to choose a different icon for it, right? If I were to delete this image here, this donut icon, and insert a new one, I would have to reapply the motion path. I'd have to reapply any effects that I've added to it, like the drop shadow. I would also have to redo the timing in the timeline. That would take a whole bunch of work. Instead of deleting and inserting a new image, I can just swap out the image completely. So to do that, all I have to do is right-click, and I'm sure many of you have done this. I use this feature all the time. Right-click, and there's an option for Replace Picture. And you can replace the picture from File. So if I replace from File, and let's go find a different icon from my graphics folder. And let's say I wanted to go with this chicken sandwich hot dog thing. I'll click Open, and it swaps out the image, but it doesn't do anything else. It keeps the effects, it keeps the motion path, it keeps the settings in the timeline. Everything stays the same. It just swaps out the image. So if you ever need to update an image, just right-click, Replace Picture, so that you don't have to delete it and recreate it. All right, that was tip number 14, replace a picture. And that works with all sorts of things, not just icons. All right, so tip number 15, manage course assets in the media library. One of the nice things that you can do in Storyline, I don't know if this is in Storyline 3, I believe this is just a Storyline 360 feature. If you go to the View tab, there is an option for media library here. And what's great about the media library is it's a one-stop shop where you can see everything in your project. All of your images, your characters that you're using throughout the project, any audio you have in the project, any video. And there's a lot of things you can do here in the media library. So for example, if you're going through and adding alt text to all of your images, you can do that right here in the media library and just go through each image, add your alt text. You can even add your own notes here. If you want to note something about the graphic, you could put notes to it. You can also see where the image is being used. So for example, if I go to my characters here, I don't know why my camera went off, I apologize. I go to my characters here. I can see on which slides the character is being used, and I can jump to that location in the project. You can do all sorts of stuff to help you manage your assets in your project. The other thing you can do here, if I am correct here, you can replace the images here. You can also export the image here. So if you lost the original file and you want to save it off, you can export it. All right. So that is tip number 15, managing course assets in the media library. Let's go to tip number 16. While we're here in the media library, round trip editing with the media library. So let's say you have this graphic here, this hot dog chicken sandwich thing, and you need to make an edit to it, right? In an outside program. One of the things that you can do is if you click the edit button here, you can choose an outside program to edit it in, and it will then bring that edited version back into Storyline. So if I were to say, edit it in Snagit, that's the editor I have on this computer right now. We'll give it a moment. It's going to take a moment for it to open up here. Let's hope it does. There we go. And I don't know what kind of edit I need to make to this. Let's say I wanted to, I don't know, we'll add this happy stamp to it, right? Make that smaller. That probably wouldn't be the style of edit that you would do with something like this, but you get my point here, right? Or I wanted to change the image or something like that. You can make any edits in an outside program. Now, if I close this and hit save, you'll see that it brings that back into Storyline, and now we have the version that I edited. Of course, I completely destroyed that image, but you can see it edited it, and it's updated in my project as well. So if you need to, I don't know, remove the background from an image, make something, apply some effect, blur something out, you can do that outside of Storyline and bring it right in. And that's a really great feature. This is a bonus tip. Let's say you have an image. Let's find an image here. Let's go to this slide here. Let's say you have this image here and you want to blur it out, right? There's no way to blur images in Storyline, which makes no sense to me, right? So I can use my media library, and let's find the image here. We'll use this one, and I'll go edit it in, say, Snagit. Give it a moment here to open it up. Right? And let's say I wanted to, I don't know, blur something out. Maybe I want to use this because I'm using it as a background image or something like that. We'll increase the intensity of my blur. Let's select that. Let's make it way blurrier, right? Close this out, hit save. And now I have a blurry image, right? It's a great option so that you don't have to always do things outside of Storyline and bring it in. You can still kind of stay in Storyline and do your round trip editing, and you see it's blurred out that image, right? If you needed to do something like that. That was kind of a bonus tip. Okay, tip number 16. Okay, let's do tip number 17, preventing clicking on videos. This is another good one. Let's go to slide 1.9 here. Now, I'm going to preview this slide here, which has a video. And one thing that many people don't realize in Storyline is that your learners can control videos, not just with your timeline, but also by clicking on the video, which can mess things up. So you'll see my timelines moving here across the screen. But if I click on the video, I can actually pause it. And maybe you don't want that, right? But you can see my timeline still going, right? It's kind of a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. Maybe you don't want your learners independently controlling the video from your actual seek bar in the timeline, because maybe you have audio narration or something synced up with it, right? So this is kind of a workaround tip. There isn't actually technically a feature in Storyline where you can prevent the learner from clicking on the video. So this one's kind of a hack, okay? So I'm going to close the preview. If you want to prevent your learners from accidentally clicking on videos, let's say you have like a video bumper that animates in your logo at the start of a course or something like that, or a video like this of, you know, making healthy food. The way you can do that is by putting a transparent shape on top of it, which acts like a pane of glass that prevents the learner from clicking on it. So to do that, I'll go to Insert, and I'm going to do Shape, and I'm just going to insert a square here, and I'll just put a big old square over it. And there's our default square that I set earlier. I'm going to turn off that drop shadow here. Let me do no shadow. And then I'm just going to set the fill color. I'll do right-click Format Shape. I'm going to set the fill to 100% transparent. I don't need the outline, so I'll turn that off. And I'll click OK, or I'll click Close. That shape is there. We can't see it, but it's 100% transparent. So now it acts like a pane of glass. And usually what I'll do is I'll just label this on my timeline as, you know, click blocker or something similar, right? And what you don't want to do is you don't want to set it to no fill, because then it's literally like a hole that somebody can click in. You want to set to 100% transparent by right clicking and doing that. Now, if I preview my slide, I'll give it a moment here. Now I can't click on it. It's controlled through the timeline. I can fast forward and it'll jump around in the timeline, which is how I would want it to behave, but I cannot click on it, which is really nice. All right. So that was tip number 17, preventing clicking on videos. Let's go to tip number 18, add cue points to timeline. This is my favorite set of tips, especially when you're doing intricate timeline work with animations. Okay, so I have this slide here. I have some images, there's some audio narration, I have some bullet points, all right? I'm gonna show you a series of tips here that will help you better animate objects on your timeline. That'll make it a little bit easier. When I first got started in Storyline, the way that I would animate my slides is I would hit play here. You're not going to be able to hear the audio really well, but I'll turn up my volume all the way, so maybe you'll hear it. I would hit play here, wait for it to load, which takes a few seconds.
In this course, you
I would listen to the audio,
the importance of health and wellness,
pause it, and then adjust when I want something to animate in or out, right? And then do that over and over and over again. And when you're creating a really intricate slide with some intricate animations, that can be really annoying. So one way to make it easier is by adding cue points to your timeline. Now, what are cue points? Cue points are simply little markers that you can add to your timeline up here. And they're just visual indicators to let you know when you want something to happen. So if I click on, say, 5 seconds here, let's say I want something to happen there. I can right click and create cue point at playhead. And you'll see I have this little cue point. This is a little number 1 here. And I can drag and move it wherever I want. And then I can right click and add another cue point. And I have cue point number 2. And like I said, they're just visual indicators for you to remember, hey, at 3.5 seconds, I want something to happen there, right? Or at 7 seconds, I want something to happen there. Now I'm going to delete these cue points. I'm going to right click and delete all cue points. That's what cue points are. If you don't know what cue points are, there's that tip. One of the other cool things that you can do if you want to use cue points to time out your animations is that you can actually add cue points to your timeline while you're previewing the slide or while you're previewing the timeline. So I'm going to hit the stop button here, and it'll bring my playhead all the way back to the beginning. And I'm going to hit play here. And I'm going to give it the few seconds to load. And as it's playing, I'm going to hit the C key on my keyboard to add the cue point. Let me hit stop. Let me try that one more time. Play. And each time I want a cue point, I'm going to hit C. Let's see what happened here. Let's try it here. It's being funky.
We believe that your health and wellness matters. Even if
so if I want a cue point there, I'll hit C.
Overall wellness.
Cue point there.
A balanced life can lead to a happier and healthier you. In this course, you will explore the importance of health and wellness, how to plan a healthy meal, and how to calculate your BMI.
All right.
If you're ready
so I'm going to
hit
hit stop.
Started.
So I hit the C key for where I want those cue points. Now let's focus here where those learning objectives were mentioned. I added a cue point for where each learning objective is mentioned. Let's say I wanted to sync up those bullet points so that they all animate in time with my audio narration. Now, right now, if I were to preview from, say, 11 seconds on, actually, we'll do 9 seconds on. Let me play this. You're going to notice that all of my bullet points animate in at the same time. So let me hit play here.
And lead to a happier and healthier you. In this course, you will explore.
So it all animates in at the same time. But what if I wanted my bullet points to animate independently, right? This is my next tip. So we talked about cue points. I showed you how to add cue points while you're previewing by hitting the C key. The next thing I want to show you is how you can control the animation of text that's all in the same text box. All of these bullet points, I'm going to actually hide these images to make it a little bit easier to see. All of these bullet points are in the same text box. Now, if you were like me when I first got started with Storyline, if I had several bullet points or several paragraphs of text that I wanted to animate in independently, I would actually put them in separate text boxes so that I could control the animation. But you can actually change that. You can actually, if you click on the text box, go to your animations tab, and let's say we wanted to add in, I don't know, a fade in animation, so they'll fade in. But if you go to your effect options, at the very, very bottom, there's this option for by paragraph. And you'll notice if I click on that, I get this little arrow here on my timeline. And if I click on that arrow, or it's called a caret, I don't know why it's called a caret. I call it an arrow. you can see now I have individual items for each of my lines within the text box. So it says, in this course, you'll explore the importance of your health and wellness, how to plan a healthy meal, how to calculate your BMI. Even though those objects are in the same text box, I can control them independently. Now let's go back to the cue points and see why this is so powerful. So I added those 3 cue points here for each of the learning objectives. Now, if I want to time them to the audio narration, like I did with the cue points, all I have to do is right-click on the item in the timeline, align to cue point, and I can choose which cue point to align it to. In this case, it's cue point number 3. And you'll see how it jumps down to cue point number 3. Now I'll align this one, align to cue point number 4, right-click on this one, align to cue point number 5. And now I've synced up my animations by adding cue points. I was able to do with hitting the C key while previewing my slide. I was able to control each of my bullet points independently by animating in by paragraph under the animation tab. And then I was able to quickly align them to the cue points. That saves me a lot of time from having to play and pause and then adjust the timing, play and pause and adjust the timing, right? So now if I preview this now, we'll go ahead and make everything visible. I'll hit stop, we'll hit play. Let's preview it.
Here at HealthCo, we believe that your health and wellness matters. Even if you're just starting to monitor your overall wellness, maintaining a balanced life can lead to a happier and healthier you. In this course, you will explore the importance of health and wellness, how to plan a healthy meal, and how to calculate your BMI.
All right. So that is, I don't know how many tips I just did there. I did tip number 18, adding cue points to the timeline. Tip number 19, adding cue points while previewing the timeline. That was hitting the C key. We aligned timeline objects to cue points, and we animated multiple bullet points by paragraph. Those 4 tips. All right. Let's go to tip number 22, add slide transitions to layers. So I'm going to go back to slide 1.6 here. Now I'm going to delete these. I don't need these buttons here anymore. So let me hold those. I'm on a Mac, so I'll hold function, hit delete. Okay. Now, one of the things that I'm sure many of you are aware of, for those of you familiar with PowerPoint, is you have the option for transitions here in the ribbon. You can add slide transitions to your slides. So things will fade from one slide to the next, and you have all sorts of interesting transitions, right? We've all done slide transitions, especially if you've done PowerPoint before, right? But one of the cool things you can do in Storyline is you can actually add slide transitions to your layers as well. So let's say for each of these pop-up windows, instead of them just appearing, let me preview it and I'll show you what it looks like right now.
There are
so I'll click and they kind of fly in, right? Let me mute my audio. I click, it flies in. Those are shape animations. But let's say I wanted it to do something like a fade in, right? If you click on your slide layers and go to the transitions tab, you can actually have them animate in using a slide transition. So let's say, for example, we wanted them to fade in instead. I can do that. I'll do fade on this one, and I'll do fade on this one. Now, if I preview this slide,
there are 3
mute my audio so you can hear me, and you'll see how it, you can't really see it because it's happening. We have that thing flying in. Let me turn off that fly in animation. It'll be easier to see. Animations, no animation. Okay, let's try that again. Preview the slide. Mute my audio so you can hear me.
There are 3 main components to a health.
Mute your fitness. And you see how it fades in, right? So you can add in slide transitions to slide layers if you don't want to manually animate in all of the objects on your slide layers, all right? That brings me to tip number 23, hide objects on a base layer when you're on a slide layer, all right? So right now I'm on a slide layer for your fitness, right? But you'll notice that I can see several of the objects still on my base layer. In fact, I can even interact with them, kind of, right? You can see how I'm hovering over this button. What if I wanted to hide those objects on my base layer when I'm on a slide layer? Let me show you how I used to do this before I learned the right way to do it. The way I used to do this is if I didn't want the learner to be able to say, click on this button when I'm on the Your Fitness layer, I would go insert a shape, and it would be like a box here, and I'd put it right here. And of course, that's my default one that I set earlier, but let's do a shape fill of white. and then no outline, and let's turn off the shape effects, right? And then I would send this to the back, and it would block the learner from clicking or seeing that thing. But that's not really elegant, right? Because you have this ugly white shape there, right? Even though it's hiding it, I can, there's something there, right? Instead, one of the things you can do is when you're on your slide layer, if you open up the timeline, you'll notice that there's one of those little arrows or carrots here for your base layer objects. And if I click and expand this, while I'm on the slide layer, I can toggle on and off the visibility of any objects on a base layer. So let's say I wanted to hide those buttons. I can click and hide the type button, the health button, and the fitness button. Now you can't see them. And I can hide anything else. Let's say I wanted to hide that slide title up there, right? I can click on that and now it's hidden. I can click and hide pretty much everything if I really wanted to keep it really, really clean. But maybe let's at least keep the slide title, right? Now you have to do that by a slide layer by slide layer basis. So if I go to your health, we have our base layer objects, and I'd have to do the same thing here. Hide all the buttons. Let's hide all the icons, and we'll keep the slide title there. And I'll do the same thing with your diet. Hide the buttons, hide the icons, but I'll keep the slide title. Again, it's this base layer objects when you're on a slide layer. Now, if I preview it,
there are three
click on, let me turn off my audio.
Click on each button to
and do your fitness. Now those items are hidden, right? If I go back, they come back, right? I don't know why my hover state was doing some weird stuff there. Hiding objects on the base layer. Now I see many of you mentioning the slide layer properties. Yes, you can do that as well. There is an option to hide objects on base layer that will hide everything. Maybe you want that, maybe you don't. That's an important thing to keep in mind. But if you want to hide individual items, you can do that in your timeline. All right. And you can also prevent user from clicking on the base layer too. That's another thing you can do too. So that's in the slide layer properties as well. Okay. So that was hide objects on base layer. Let's do tip number 24, which is create a button set. I'll go through this one rather quickly because we're short on time. This hour went by quick. Okay, let's go to this slide. Let me give you a common situation that you might run into. Let's say you're creating a slide like this, where the learner is going to select one of several objects. Here we have 3 characters, right? And if I click on one of the characters, go to the states panel, you can see I have a hover state and a selected state, right? And in this situation, maybe I want the learner to pick a character for a scenario that they're going to do. If I preview this slide right now, one of the issues you'd run into is I can select her, but I can also select him, and I can also select this guy as well, right? Well, in this situation, I only want the learner to be able to select one of these 3 items. Now, if you were like me when I first got started in Storyline, the way I would do that is I would create a whole bunch of triggers. I'd have a trigger that said if this character selected, set this character to normal and set this character to normal. But if this guy's selected, select her to normal, set her to normal or him to normal. If he's selected, select these 2 to normal. Like you create like 9 triggers before you're done with it. And if you have more than 3 items, it gets exponentially more triggers, right? Well, you can create something that's called a button set. And a button set will essentially turn these 3 interactive objects into a radio button, right? Radio buttons only allow you to pick 1 item. And it's a feature that's hidden in plain sight. So let me show you how to do it. If I want the learner to only be able to select one of 3 of these, I'm going to hold Shift and select all 3. Okay. Right click. And here's the option for button set. And I can select this here, or I can do new set. In this case, I'll do new set because I like to give things meaningful names in Storyline. So I'll do new set. And I'll say this is my character selection. And I can leave it as that. And I'll click add. Now, nothing changes on the screen. Nothing happens. But if I preview it, unlike before where I could select all 3 of them, now if I select her, but if I go change my mind and select him, I can only choose 1 at any given time. That works for buttons, any objects that the learner might have a selected state, right? Pretty cool. That's a button set. Hidden in plain sight. Okay. Last tip, tip number 25, and then I'm happy to stay on as long as we have questions. Tip number 25 is calculating the estimated duration of your course. Let's say you've created a course with a bunch of audio narration, and you're wanting to know how long the course is. Maybe you want to put that in that learning management system or something else. This is a feature that's, again, hidden deep down in the settings. But if you go to the Publish button and you go to Publish Out as an LMS, and you click on this little, the three dot icon here. Is it on the web as well? Let's find out here. Yes. I guess it doesn't matter. It can be web or LMS. It doesn't matter which selection here. But if you click on the three little dots, then you'll see that there's a duration option here, and it's calculated automatically. You see, it's about 5 minutes. That number is calculated based off the total amount of audio narration or video you have in your course. So if you're creating a course with audio narration and video, you can get a calculated duration of that time. It's also based on, I think, on the length of the timeline as well. Now, of course, you're not going to be able to account for interactivity. How long it takes somebody to complete an interaction is going to vary. But if you want a quick and dirty calculation, you can do that there as well. And of course, you can enter your own number. This is more about metadata being published out for your LMS, but you can find out that number there as well. So again, you go to Publish, Web, or LMS, click these little three dots here, and you will find that number there. All right. So those are my 25 tips, tricks, and time savers, and I'm sure there's a lot more I didn't even think of. Much of these are based on my LinkedIn learning course, Articulate Storyline Quick Tips. So if you want to learn more, I think I have like 52 videos out there. They're all like a minute or less in duration. So feel free to check that out if you have access to LinkedIn Learning. All right, that's it. I want to thank you all so much for coming. Any other questions at all? If I miss your questions in chat, by all means, feel free to put them in the questions tab. We'll go ahead and end it here. Again, if you happen to be watching this recording on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, and click that bell button. Let me put a couple things in chat too. Feel free, if you want to learn, check out our future events. We have a whole bunch of other upcoming how-to workshops. You can find those, our full schedule. And of course, if you want to learn more about learning Articulate Storyline and building your portfolio and learning about storyboarding and the entire e-learning design and development process, feel free to check out the e-learning Designers Academy. I put that link in there as well. Otherwise, thank you all so much for coming. This was fantastic, and I hope you all walked away learning at least one new thing that you didn't know before.